It's episode 563 of the Locked On Texas Rangers podcast. On today's show, I'm breaking down the Rangers' announcement of their minor league break camp rosters. So which prospects are at which level, who made some big jumps, which roster is going to be the most interesting. And I update my roster projection for opening day for the Rangers. My final opening day roster projection. I think I'm going to be 100% right on all 28 of my picks. All that and more on this episode of Locked On Rangers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Rangers, your daily Texas Rangers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On the Texas Rangers. I'm your host, Bryce Patrick, entering year 4, covering this team for the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you guys so much for making Locked On Rangers your very first listen every single day. If you're not already, go ahead and follow me on Twitter at Bryce Patrick. Follow the show at Locked On Rangers and subscribe on YouTube, where we are less than 10 subscribers away from our goal of 700 by opening day. We are officially a week away from the Rangers' first regular season game of 2022. First with Marcus Semien and Corey Seager and Mitch Garver and John Gray, and also some other guys are there as well. So excited about next week's shows. Got a crossover episode with the entirety or pretty much all of the Locked On AL West hosts. I'm also going to try and get a special guest who is a Blue Jays fan, knows a whole lot about the Blue Jays, since we don't have a Locked On Blue Jays host right now, to talk about the Rangers' first series. And on Monday, 5 burning questions the Rangers must answer, and of course, a season preview. Lots of great stuff, like I just said, for next week. But today's episode, the Rangers have announced their break camp rosters. I'm going to get into that. I'm also going to get into my final opening day roster projections. But first, I want to talk about one game. One minor league game. One spring training game, the last one that I think we will see from some of the A guys. Corey Seager got to hit against his beloved former Dodger for the first time and hit a massive home run. Looked pretty solid while playing shortstop. Also got to learn a little bit more about him from the Dodgers broadcast, since it was just their broadcast, even though it was in Surprise. Also, kind of funny little note, if you didn't see the Oscars and you have not been online at all, and you missed Will Smith slapping Chris Rock at the Oscars, there are also 2 baseball Will Smiths. One of those is a catcher for the Dodgers who's really good at baseball. The other one is a reliever who I believe he still pitches for the Braves. He was in the World Series last year. Anyway, this Will Smith got booed every time he came up to the plate in the spring training game. So applause to your commitment to the bit, whatever surprise baseball fans were there. Much appreciation. We also learned that Corey Seager is an extremely aggressive first pitch swinger, and he also gets a whole lot of hits and a decent amount of home runs on the first pitch, which, if I'm not wrong, I believe that home run was either on an 0-1 count or on an 0-0 count or a 1-0 count. So nice to see him being aggressive and him looking a little bit better just to end the spring. And I think he's going back to Texas. Anyway, spring training games are wrapping up, and none of this stuff matters anymore. We're not going to see too many of the big 3 guys in Garver, Seager, and Semien, I don't think, in very many more of these Rangers spring training games. But let's get into the important stuff. The Rangers announced their break camp roster, which is not the same as the opening day rosters for these minor league teams. There's still a few guys who are at big league camp who have yet to be assigned. I have a pretty good idea of where those guys are going to be assigned. There's not a whole lot of surprises here. There's really not, but there are some really interesting guys, and it's interesting to get a look at where the talent level is pretty stacked. In low A, there's a lot of interesting guys, but not a whole lot of guys on my top 30. There's only one actually on my top 30. There's Maximo Acosta, but there are a couple of guys who are worth keeping an eye on in low A. And down east is going to be interesting this year. They got a few guys that Grant said he was keeping an eye on. He said on the pitching side, Jose Corniel, Santos, Kendrick, Dylan McLean, who was, I believe, a 2020 pick of the Rangers when they only had 5 picks in that draft. And the rest of those 4 have done pretty well so far. And McLean, we just haven't seen a whole lot of. Maximo Acosta is the only one who's there, who's on my top 30. But a guy who I was really interested in, and I was really leaning on the fence about putting him on the top 30, is Marcus Smith, who was part of the deal to trade Mike Minor to the A's. There's also him and Dustin Harris, and that's looking like an amazing trade for the Rangers because Dustin Harris is in my top 10, and he absolutely crushed it last year. And Smith hasn't played a whole lot, but he's definitely someone to keep an eye on. Jose Acosta is another guy to keep an eye on there in the low A down east level. I guess I was always so confused because down east used to always be high A and, down high. Now it's low A. So down east is really a very helpful reminder, which I'm just now kind of figuring out, piecing together myself. I probably should have put that together a long time ago, so I wouldn't have been nearly as confused. But now you can use that information to help you if you also get confused about which level is there. But yeah, not a whole lot of crazy talent. The next level is really, I'm keeping a lot of eyes on a lot of guys, and I'm hoping that a lot of them get a mid-season promotion to come to Frisco so that I can see all of them. I mean, this Frisco team's already going to be pretty loaded to start the season, but by mid-season, this could be the best Frisco team I have ever seen, and I have been going out to Frisco every year since 2014. So that's really saying something because the Rangers had some really great systems and some really great Frisco teams since 2014. But anyway, in high A, I have 8 guys on my top 30 Rangers prospects there. There's starting with Owen White, who's my number 5, Evan Carter, my number 7. Evan Carter gets the bump after a very short stint in Down East last year. A little bit aggressive, but I like it. I liked what I saw from him in a very limited sample size. Again, we talked earlier this week with Grant on the minor league season predictions, or preview, I guess, is what we called it, about how important his health is. I also talked about that on Wednesday's episode as well, so go check that episode out if you haven't already. Luis Angel Acuna is number 9 in my top prospects, so they were off the bat. They've got 3 guys in my top 10. Trevor Hauver at number 12, which I probably had him a little high, but that's fine. Ricky Vanasco at 17, Aaron Zavala at 18, TK Roby at 19, who also gets the bump up to Hickory, who also had a limited sample size in Down East last year, but gets to make the bump. Thomas Sagasi at 22, a really aggressive assignment for him, but I like it. He's a guy who I was pretty high on. I still don't know a whole lot about him. The Rangers, they haven't seen him in a whole lot of minor league games, so it's a pretty aggressive promotion, but I really like that. So 8 guys in my top 30 are going to be in high A this year. That is pretty impressive. I do lean more towards the advanced guys, so this is a good, or lean more towards ranking guys who are more advanced a little bit higher than, I guess the average publication or ranking. I don't have a whole lot of guys who haven't made it stateside yet in my rankings, but again, I don't have a whole lot of, again, I do have a whole lot of AAA guys. Anyway, the top 3 levels, what I'm saying, the top 3 levels are stacked. Owen White and Evan Carter. I expect Evan Carter to be there for most of the year. Luis Angel Acuna, he could end up getting a promotion by the end of the year. If I remember correctly, he wasn't in Hickory last year. I think he might have made it towards the back half of the season, come up to Hickory, but I'm interested to see what he can do there. Ricky Vanasco is a guy who I think could earn a mid-season promotion. TK Roby needs some time. His stuff might be AA ready at this point, TK Roby, but he needs some time to refine it. He doesn't have a whole lot of minor league innings because, again, he was drafted in 2020, and he was drafted out of high school. So he needs some time to progress and to get some innings in him and not be too overwhelmed. I think this is a pretty aggressive assignment for him, but I think he's up to the challenge. His stuff is some of that nastiest in the system, and he is already pretty advanced for a high school kid. He did look a little, Grant said he did look like he was struggling a little bit when he saw him in spring training, but it looks like he is figuring out a better arm path, a more, healthy, natural, repeatable arm path so that he can not have injuries throughout his career, because he did have an injury last year. He was able to avoid Tommy John surgery, but still, you want to be able to make sure that mechanic is repeatable and isn't going to injure you, and you can feel really, really good about it. And it's looking like, I'm hoping that that's the case for him, and I think that will be. But coming up, I'm going to get into the AA guys, the AAA guys, and my final opening day roster projection. But first, this episode is brought to you by Built Bar. You guys know about Built Bar. It's the most delicious tasting protein bar you could ever hope to ingest. It is absolutely delicious. They've got a bazillion, literally a bazillion, I think that's the actual technical number, different flavors. So no matter what kinds of things you like, whether you like, you're a chocolate and caramel kind of person, if you like, your chocolate and fruits, they've got raspberry, they've got, strawberry, they've got all kinds of different flavors. Or if you're a mint chocolate kind of person, they've got mint mint chocolate things as well. They've also got some coconuts. They got some Built Bar Puffs, which are marshmallows infused with protein and covered in chocolate. It's absolutely delicious, and they're super great for you as well. Most of them contain 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. If these sound great, you want to try them out for yourself. If you haven't already, go to built.com, use promo code LOCKED15, and get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. Thank you guys so much for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every day. If you like this show, you might want to go check out Locked On MLB Prospects. Host Lindsey Crosby is a prospect encyclopedia, and he is going deep on the MLB Stars of Tomorrow. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Now let's look at AA. As of right now, they have 7 guys on my top 30, including my number 2 prospect, Jack Leiter, who is almost assuredly going to be the opening day starter. I'm going to be, if he is announced as the opening day starter on Friday, which is also the same day the Rangers start their season, it would have been really nice if they could have started their season on Thursday so that I could go watch them from the comfort of my home and then go see Jack Leiter during their second game. But no, I'm going to be forced to watch the Rangers on my phone / on the press box TV in Frisco, because I am going to be there to see Jack Leiter opening day if he is announced as the opening day starter. Now, they also have Ezequiel Duran, who is my number 4 prospect. They have Dustin Harris, who's my number 10 prospect. So 3 guys in the top 10. Zach Kent at number 15, Cole Reagans at 24, Avery Weems at 25, and Cody Bradford at 27. That is a already stacked rotation. They've got Leiter, Kent, Reagans, Weems, and Bradford. Those are all guys that are in my top 30. And there could be some more guys pushing on the way. I wouldn't be surprised if Reagans earns a decently early promotion to AAA. They got to be kind of aggressive with him because of the amount of time that he's missed. He did really well to just stay healthy last year after sustaining 2 Tommy John surgeries. He's a former first-round pick, and I really like him and his story. Avery Weems is a guy who I think he might end up being the odd man out in this rotation, even though I have him ranked over Cody Bradford in hindsight. I wish I didn't do that, but I'm sticking with it, and I am not updating my rankings until mid-season, because if I did, then I would have updated Ronnie Enriquez to not be on there at 15. Slight note, I did get confused wondering where the heck is Ronnie Enriquez and all these things, and I completely forgot that he was part of the Mitch Garver trade along with IKF. It wasn't just a straight 1-for-1. I'm like, why is no one talking about? Is he hurt? Did I miss something? And I'm like, oh, that's right. He's in Minnesota. Good luck with the Twins, Ronnie Enriquez. Wish I could have seen you be a part of this AA rotation. But that's 5 deep, legitimately 5 deep. At this point, and in AAA, there are 5 of my guys that are in the top 30 on this roster to start the season. Starting with number 3, Cole Winn, a guy who is probably going to spend a decent chunk of time in AAA. He had a few starts at AAA last year that weren't super great, but again, it was at the end of the season, and he hadn't had a full season. He hadn't pitched more than, I believe, 75 innings, which is what he pitched in 2019. They were just trying to get his stamina up, and he absolutely annihilated all AA hitters last year. They're going to give him some time. There's no reason to rush him. I don't think he's going to be pushing Spencer Howard for number 5 spot in the rotation anytime super soon. But as of this point, it's looking like the competition for those 4 and 5 spots in this Ranger rotation are going to be a lot more difficult, a lot more intense, and than I initially thought, and that's great. I think people are going to push Taylor Hearn, who looked really, really great in the last start that I saw him in. I think he is a legit starter. It's looking like Martin Perez as the guy. He's going to have to earn his spot in the rotation. It's not going to be just a gimme that he's going to be the number 2 or number 3. Dane Dunning is also might end up getting pushed because everyone outside of John Gray is kind of questionable at this point. Martin Perez is the most locked in because the Rangers know they can count on him to give them a bunch of innings, which is going to be very, very necessary and helpful. But anyway, I got completely sidetracked. Josh H. Smith at number 8 is another top 10 guy who is on this AAA roster. Davis Wenzel at 21, Yuri Rodriguez at 23, Bubba Thompson at 26. Now, there are a few other guys who aren't announced on this roster yet, but I'm pretty darn sure will be there. If not at the start of the season, then pretty quickly. I think Justin Foscue is probably going to end up being in AAA. It wouldn't surprise me if he was in AA either. It's going to be one of those 2 locations. I'm not exactly sure which, because he didn't do super great in AA. He absolutely annihilated it in high A, was way too advanced for that level, and showed a lot more power than we ever thought that he could show. And that was great and encouraging. But once he got pushed up to AA, the power kind of dried up. The strikeouts and the approach kind of went out the window, and it wasn't super great for him. It wasn't anywhere at the point where you'd say, all right, this guy has mastered this level. He has nothing left to learn there. So I think it might be more likely that he ends up in Frisco as opposed to AAA. But hopefully by the end of the season, he is pushing and knocking on the door of AAA if he's not there entirely. I don't think he's going to make the major leagues this year because he ended the year so poorly. But again, I could be wrong. This is a guy who's a former first-round pick and the Rangers really, really liked. And with that output of power as a guy who is pretty much going to be a bat-first guy, that was a really encouraging sign. Also, guys who I think will be there as well, A.J. Alexy at 14 and Glenn Otto at 16. So right now there are 5 guys in my top 30. There could be as many as 8 eventually. It could end up being that Foscue is in AA, and that would put the top 3 levels each having 8 guys in high A, AA, and AAA. But we'll see where those guys are. I think Alexy is probably going to kind of be on a similar trajectory as Cole Winn this year. Neither of them are quite ready to be consistent major league starters at this point. I think they both have a future in a big league rotation, but there's no need. They're both pretty young. Even though Alexy has been up and did pitch fairly well in his major league stint last year. I think they both have some things to learn, and they both could use some innings, just getting them a decent chunk of innings and actually, stretching them out so that when they do come up to the major leagues, they're not going to be suffering from arm fatigue. They're not going to be going 3-4 innings in any of their starts. They're going to be going at least 5-6 innings in all their starts. So, but I really like A.J. Alexy. I like what I saw from him this spring. I just liked what I saw from some of the other guys in Brock Burke and also Spencer Howard a little bit more. But coming up, I'm going to be talking about where I think Brock Burke is going to end up, because he wasn't announced on this minor league roster and he hasn't been announced for the major league roster. And I really, really liked what I've seen from him so far. Coming up, we'll talk about that and who else is going to make this big league opening day roster. But first, this episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline is the best place to go for all of your sports betting needs. They're starting to put together some over-unders for the season. They've got a couple of Rangers over-unders. They've got Corey Seager, his home runs over-under set at 23.5. I think that's a little low, but honestly, it depends on his health. If he's healthy, plays 150 games, I think he crushes that. I think he hits the over. I think he might end up hitting 30 home runs, which he's never done that in his major league career. But he's had those injuries, and when he first came up and was healthier, he wasn't nearly as old. He didn't have as many years working under a major league, strength and conditioning, and just getting his big boy power of, being grown up and being fully matured into his frame. So I think that he could hit over 23.5. They have Marcus Semien over under at 29.5. I think he's going to hit 30 home runs this year. And, if you want to put some money on it, you can go to betonline.net. It's the best place for all your sports betting needs. BetOnline, where the game starts. Now, let's take a look at this roster projection version 2.0. I know I probably titled the episode. I will title the episode. I already know what I'm going to title this episode. I already titled it as this, and it took me till the third break to get here. But there aren't that many changes at this point. Last week, I felt pretty good about my roster projection. It was very similar to Levi Weaver's again. And then the one thing that I changed from his was a guy, Chase Lee, who I believe the next day, if not 2 days later, was announced that he was being optioned to minor league camp. Also, Chase Lee is going to be in AA. If you got a chance to see him, the Viper is really good. I'm a little surprised that he wasn't starting in AAA because he absolutely annihilated AA hitters. He was assigned there right out of the draft. That was really encouraging to see. And even more encouraging is that he didn't walk anybody. He struck everybody out and didn't allow a whole lot of contact. He's going to be another really interesting guy to see in AA, and I think could eventually make this major league roster. But it's looking like, it's not looking like, it is a fact that he is not going to be on the opening day roster. So I had to make some changes, and I made another couple tweaks to the bullpen as well. Now, let's go through the starters. At catcher, we have Mitch Garver. First base, Nathaniel Lowe. Second base, Marcus Semien. Shortstop, Corey Seager. Third base, Andy Ibanez. Left field, Brad Miller. Center field, Adolis Garcia. Right field, Cole Calhoun. DH, Willie Calhoun. Bench, unchanged, Jose Trevino, Nick Solak, Charlie Culberson, and Eli White. In the rotation, I still feel good about this. I still feel good about... actually, I'm going to switch a couple of things. I just copied and pasted this, and I thought that I had the same names, but they are in a different order in my head. Now, John Gray, number 1 opening day starter, already done deal. That is happening. Another done deal is a Dunning deal. Dane Dunning I'm having as my number 2 at this point. I think that spacing him out, because we're not exactly sure how many innings he's going to be able to go. I think they're pretty much just going to let it loose, because he wasn't allowed to go very deep into games last year. He was still very efficient with his pitches, but when they were taking him out at after 80-ish pitches or so, he'd be 5-6 innings into a game. So I think that makes sense for him to be number 2 in this rotation. And then Martin Perez, number 3. I think he might end up being the second best starter in this rotation. I'm not exactly sure what to expect from Dane Dunning in year 2. I did like what I saw from him his first full season with the Rangers, but again, they were still, kind of keeping the gloves on him and not letting him go nearly as deep, not letting him throw as many pitches as he would have liked. But they were just being cautious with his injury history and his lack of stamina being built up over the years. And that's not his fault. But I'm curious to see what he does this year in the number 2 role in this rotation, at least at this point. Martin Perez, number 3, like I said. Number 4, Taylor Hearn. I think he's locked it down. Loved what I saw from him against the Dodgers, against a really, really good lineup. Made them look really bad yesterday, and that is very encouraging, even though it is spring training. But it's still a really dang dangerous lineup. It's probably not the best lineup of all time, but I think it's definitely going to be up there as the best, maybe, depending on how things go, if not the best lineup of the 2020s. It's really stinking good, and it's really stinking deep. But number 5 in this rotation, I say it's Spencer Howard. He looked great in 2 starts so far. The Rangers feel really good about him. They invested a lot in him. Well, not invested a lot, but they're banking a lot on him, because they traded an all-star starting pitcher and a pretty dang good closer and a prospect for him. He was the only return in that Kyle Gibson trade. That's it. There was no, rider, no player to be named later, no little flyer in just out of the draft. It's him. It's him or nothing. And so if he ends up busting, then the Rangers are going to be looking back at that trade and wondering if they could have gotten more. So I think he's going to fill the number 5 spot in this rotation. In the bullpen, pretty much the same at this point. Joe Barlow, Brett Martin, Spencer Patton, Dennis Santana, John King, Garrett Richards, Colby Allard. Now, Josh Sborz, and the last 2 is where I changed from last time. Greg Holland, I believe, is going to make it. I really liked what I saw from him this spring. He's an older guy. Now, I think there's going to be a lot of value in multi-inning guys, and I don't know that he is that, but he is a very veteran presence, and we've seen the last couple of years when he's on, he still has it. He still completely has it, and he is really, really hard to hit against. And, if it doesn't work out, then there's not a whole lot of, a whole lot of hurt feelings. He'll just go sign somewhere else, and it'll be fine. It's not like he's out of options or anything. Well, I mean, he is, but he's an older pitcher. It'll be fine. It's not going to mess with any of their long-term plans, because he might be one of the first cuts once that roster space goes down from 28 names to, I believe, 26 or 25, whatever it is going to be in May 1st. Now, the last one, Brock Burke. I think he makes the Major League roster. I don't think he starts the season in AAA. And if he does, he's going to be a starter. But especially early on, because these starters are not stretched out. They don't have the full, 2 weeks before everybody gets there of pitchers and catchers reporting, or 1 week or 10 days or however long it actually usually is. They don't have the 6 weeks of throwing and getting ready to go from, when they first start going an inning or 2, and their first starts, then 3 innings, then 4, then whatever. They're at the 4 innings right now, which this normally is the point in spring training where all the hitters are bored. There's nothing else to learn about them. The roster's already set, and the beat writers go absolutely crazy, and it drives Levi Weaver to write things like pick 4 random things and tell me which is best for no stupid reason, which is one of my favorite things that he's done, but also is the complete reason for insanity for those beat writers who are stuck out in spring training for a month, especially the last 2 weeks when there's basically nothing left to learn, just learning how stretched out these starters can be. But anyway, all that to say, multi-inning guys are going to be very valuable in the bullpen. That's why they signed Garrett Richards to I believe, at least a guaranteed deal. I think there might be a second year on his deal. I can't remember exactly. But Dennis Santana has shown that he can go multiple innings. John King as well. And I think we might get multiple innings out of Brett Martin, but John King was really talented at going multiple innings and being just as effective. Colby Allard is going to be able to go multiple innings as well. Brock Burke, Dennis Santana, all those guys are pretty much multi-inning guys, and the Rangers are going to need quite a few of them. Brock Burke has looked like he can handle major leaguers in spring training. He's throwing 97, which is something he didn't do before. And so I think he makes this major league roster. I think he's earned it. I think eventually he starts competing for a starting spot. Now, the Rangers might want to be really careful with him because this is his second year coming back from a shoulder injury. It's not a second shoulder injury, but he came back last year and he just did not look like himself. He looked really disheveled and looked like he just kind of forgot how to pitch and how to trust his stuff. And he looks like he's figured that back out, gained a little bit of velocity, and looks like the same old Brock Burke, if not a better Brock Burke. And that is a guy who I believed at his peak when I was watching him in AA. I thought this guy could be a number 3 starter in the big leagues. I still think he has that capability. I don't think he's going to be anything higher than a number 3 starter, but I really think he can be a starter. And the Rangers are probably going to try and give him every opportunity to fight for the guys in the back end of that rotation, fight with the Dane Dunnings, the Taylor Hearns, the now Spencer Howards of the world for that final spot, which, it sounds like it's a good problem to have, because when you're actually competing, you need a bunch of those guys. You need the Nick Martinez's of the world. When the Rangers were competing, you have starting pitching injuries, even in years when there's not a delayed spring training and starting pitchers aren't at their fully normal opening day readiness levels. You always need some pitching depth. So having some of those guys that have some option years left that you can, send to AAA and they can bring them back up and they can do well in a pinch if you need them to, but not be quite good enough to displace the normal number 5 starter. You need a lot of those guys. And so the Rangers, it looks like they have quite a few of those guys. You'd like to see more of the surefire, like number 2, number 3 guys that are rounding out your rotation. You'd like to see a rotation with, where the final guy in your rotation is someone who you view as kind of a number 3 in a middle of the road rotation. Like that's what a contender looks like, is they have guys who they don't have just absolute duds at the back end of the rotation. They have pretty decent starters that might be a little inconsistent, but are at the very least reliable in like the number 4 and 5 spots in the rotation. And the top 3 are just nasty, nasty dudes, which the Rangers are hoping that John Gray can be one of those nasty, nasty dudes. And they're hoping that Jack Leiter can eventually. And, who knows? Owen White might end up being that guy, that kind of guy. I think his stuff might be a little bit better than Cole Winn's. He's not a better pitcher. He's not more advanced. He doesn't have a better feel. But his raw stuff might be a little bit nastier than Cole Winn's. And Cole Winn's stuff is pretty dang good as well. So that's about where I think this Rangers roster is going to be. Just going back through the bullpen: Joe Barlow, Brett Martin, Spencer Patton, Dennis Santana, John King, Garrett Richards, Colby Allard, Greg Holland, Josh Sborz, and Brock Burke. Now the starting lineup on opening day, and I think in general, is going to look something like this. You got Marcus Semien hitting leadoff, Corey Seager, the number 2 hole, Mitch Garver hitting in the 3 hole, Nathaniel Lowe batting cleanup, and hitting 5th is Adolis Garcia, Cole Calhoun, and number 6 hitting 7th is Willie Calhoun, hitting 8th, Andy Ibanez, 9th, Brad Miller. That bottom 3 is so ridiculously far better than what the Rangers have had the last few years. Now, that middle 3 from, I guess, 5, 6, 7, you'd like to see 5 and 6 maybe be a little bit better, specifically 5 and 6. Usually, when the Rangers were really, really good, everyone 1 through 6 was just absolutely deadly. 7 and 8 were fine. Usually they provided a little bit of pop. You had some Mitch Moreland in there doing all right, and then the number 9 hole. If you're getting like significant production out of your number 9 hole hitter, even decent production, like a 750 plus OPS, if you have 9 guys in your batting order that have a 775 OPS or better, that's really solid, especially if the top 3 guys are some of the best hitters at their positions in all of baseball. That is a really, really dangerous lineup. Now, the starting rotation, I trust that the Rangers actually have 5 major league caliber starters that can do a major league caliber workload, unlike last year. The bullpen, I think there's some room for improvement. There's not a whole lot of just disgusting stuff in there. I think if Joe Barlow is your closer, I really like Joe Barlow, and I like what he did last year, but I don't necessarily think that it's sustainable. But once the Rangers get back Jose Leclerc and they get back Jonathan Hernandez and some of these guys who are pretty high in my prospect rankings that are pretty advanced in the system that are right now starters that might end up being bullpen guys, if they start to get converted. Like I think Yuri Rodriguez is a guy, I think I have him at 23, and he's going to be in AAA this year. He pitched in more of a relief role last year, but if he is pitching out of the pen and he can actually focus on working on his breaking stuff, the fastball is absolutely nastiness, absolute gas. And if he can add a couple of pitches off of that, or at least one really, really good breaking pitch, that's a really disgusting reliever if he's not making the roster as a starting pitcher. But yeah, that is where I think this Rangers roster will end up. This is going to be the last one of these roster projections that I do on Monday's episode. I am so excited for next week. We are officially 7 days away from Texas Rangers Major League regular season baseball and a not bottom feeding team. I have waited so long for this to happen, a season that I have not been this excited about baseball since 2017, since Adrian Beltre was here, since Joey Gallo was still a prospect and not a Ranger. I guess technically he was a Ranger. Anyway, all this to say, I am so excited for next week. Thank you guys so much for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. On Monday's show, I will be answering I guess I'll be posing. It's not going to answer until the season progresses or ends. But I will be posing 5 burning questions that the Rangers must answer in 2022. But now, go make your second listen Locked On MLB. Paul Francis Sullivan, please just call him Sully. Just do it, all right? That's all he's asking of you. That and to listen to his show. He brings you his unique perspective on the major leagues past and present. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Guys, thank you so much for listening this week and making March the biggest month in Locked On Rangers history, somehow passing that crazy December, even though it felt like most of this month was still in the lockout. It was just this month that baseball came back. But Rangers baseball next week, 5 burning questions on Monday. Thank you guys so much for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. That'll do it for this week's editions. Until next time, don't forget to enjoy baseball.